So, welcome to the Lesbian Fiction Campfire event, Reading Around the Campfire. Today, we're welcoming three British authors who also happen to be friends of mine. And I'm really looking forward to hearing them read because right now I need to hear a non American accent. There's so many things going on in our space and our politics. It's just nice to hear some refined language. So, that being
Right.
said, our first
Perfect.
reader is going to be Terry Purkis, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she's going to read and also about herself.
Hi there, everyone. I'm going to read from my work in progress, which is, I don't know if you can see it. I think that's going to be my cover. Um, I'm still a little bit undecided, but it's And Love Will Find its way. It's going to be the fourth book in the Perfect Blend series, which I've been writing. My books are set in Bristol, which is where I was born and I live, and it's in the area of North Bristol, which I know very well, mainly on the Gloucester Road, which is one of the main thoroughfares into the city centre. So I will start reading. All right, chapter 1. Nicole leant back against the building, one leg planted on the pavement, the other foot bent under her. She smoothed out the small crumpled piece of paper in her clammy hands and glanced at her watch. 5 more minutes. She gave a silent plea to whoever was listening, whilst the nervous butterflies in her stomach strained for a release as her emotions battled within. She could do this. The potential for the happiness she yearned for lay in the next 30 minutes. And so she fought against the overwhelming emotions of fear, sadness, and self-loathing that threatened to disrupt her peace. Her soul asked for redemption, but deep down she was neither worthy nor deserving. Nicole looked towards the coffee house and contemplated her recent life choices. She was 51, for goodness sake, and all her possessions were in the back of her small van parked around the corner. A van where she lay her head at night, that was only just large enough for a single blow-up mattress lodged between her battered guitar and a couple of black bin bags containing her clothes. The dark circles under her eyes, testament to sleepless nights, the slamming of car doors and the loud conversations of passing strangers invaded her dreams, and she perceived every noise as magnified out of context. The tight confines exasperated her sore joints and muscles. But last night she slept through. The strength of friendship faced the ultimate test as an old school friend opened her house, allowing Nicole to shower and stay the night on the settee, safe in the cocoon of her sleeping bag in a house with locked doors. The weight of the tabby cat woke her by lying on her chest, whiskers tickling her chin, and the contented deep rumble of a purr. She smiled at the recollection of the cat patting her face, demanding attention. She couldn't remember the last time her cheek was being touched with so much love and affection. Despite legal advice, she sold her house across the city to settle her debts. It was the correct decision. She couldn't let her business partner, once best friend, take responsibility for her errors after turning into a foolish, love-struck woman. It made her homeless, and the legal cost took most of her remaining money. The new nomadic life was a complete departure from her stable past on a post-war housing estate. She had moved from a comfortable lifestyle to a harsh, solitary life on the streets, struggling to survive. Nicole closed her eyes and shut herself away from the surrounding hustle and bustle of the street, allowing her mind to relax. Van life was tough, especially for someone her age. She craved security, both emotional and physical. Somewhere she could lay her head in comfort, where sleep would take her stress-free through the entire night. A place she could invite her few remaining friends, or luxuriate in a shower or bath and get dressed in comfort to again feel human. With her savings diminishing, she couldn't afford a deposit for a cheap bedsit, a room in a shared house, or even monthly rent. So every night she parked her small van on different residential streets around the city and joined the expanding band of nomads with no fixed abode, trying to survive the current economic climate. She sighed and tried not to dwell on her past decisions. How did it happen? Nicole shook her head. Forever altered were her early morning rituals, where her stroll to the bathroom or frantic run when late was a luxury, where the jets of streaming water invigorated her body, releasing any residual tiredness and stress. Then, even after getting dressed, she would smell the minty aroma of her body wash and the coconut fragrance of her shampoo and conditioner. She inhaled deeply as she tried to imagine those long-forgotten smells. Instead, her nose picked up the hint of citrus from the bold toiletries that emanated from her body. The lingering aroma of shower gel and shampoo clung to her hair and skin, and after months, she felt clean. The different smells brought renewed sadness mingled with a flash of hope, and this tiny sense of optimism produced a smile. On a normal day, the unit that plugged into the cigarette lighter socket in her van gave her enough hot water to flannel wash her important places whilst lying down, still in her sleeping bag. Then each day she smoothed the creases and struggled to pull on her outdoor clothes as she tried to keep the early morning chill from her bones. Nicole centered her thoughts and rolled her neck and shoulders. She took a couple of deeper breaths and blew out the air in a slow, steady stream. On her first walking exploration away from where her van was now parked, Nicole noticed the sign in the coffee house window for a cleaner. She gave in her resume and was ecstatic when her phone pinged, inviting her for an interview. She needed this job, or any job, and, if successful, she felt she could rejoin the world. The first step was to earn back her self-respect. She feared some past friendships would forever stay lost. Nicole was standing on a precipice. She reminded herself that she needed to summon all her reserves of confidence to confront what could be one of the most important days of her life. She realized the next half hour would make her or break her, seeing no way back if this failed. Nicole looked down at her attire, pleased that after ironing both her black trousers and her thin V-neck sweater, they looked passable for an interview. Despite their worn appearance, her shoes were polished and most of the scuff marks removed. She glanced at her watch, and pushing away from the wall, she crossed the road. Nicole stared at the door, and on hearing the happy murmurs from inside the bustling building, took a couple more steadying breaths. The tinkling bell announced her arrival as she pushed open the door. The verbal abuse that haunted her was inconspicuous. No one turned and no one acknowledged her. The delicious mix of ground coffee and specialist teas along the sweet aroma of the cabinet full of indulgent cakes and biscuits invaded her senses. Nicole took a breath and her stomach growled with a longing for all things decadent and mouth-watering. She joined the back of the queue, closed her eyes and sighed at the normality of the situation. When she reached the front, the server smiled. Her blue eyes crinkled at the corners, showing years of happiness. Yes, please, what can I get you? I have an appointment. Nicole hesitated as she glanced at the piece of paper gripped in her hand, feeling that if she relinquished her grip on it and allowed the paper to drop from her grasp, her life would flutter to the floor alongside it, walked over and then thrown out with the rubbish. With Catherine, Nicole continued. Ah, the cleaning job, the woman said. And as a barista appraised her from head to foot, butterflies in her stomach again made themselves known. Yes, Nicole nodded. Catherine is expecting you. The woman's eyes, having landed on the Labras axe tattoo on her wrist, grew even more caring, and her smile more pronounced. She pointed to a door labelled staff only. Catherine is in the office over there. Knock and wait. Nicole puffed out her cheeks and turned from the counter. The woman wished her good luck. Thank you, Nicole replied, as she forced out with confidence seeped away. Her hand froze in midair. She tried licking her lips and swallowing to create enough saliva. Her mouth felt like she was eating cotton wool. She finished the knocking motion. A muffled 1 minute sounded from the inner sanctum. Nicole pulled her shoulders back and straightened to her full height. She wiped her clammy hands down the back of her trousers. The door opened. A woman about the same age, build and height greeted her. Her short blonde wavy hair moulded her sculptured skull. Her nose, a slight bump in the middle, hung between pronounced cheekbones and above thin lips that matched the playfulness of her deep blue eyes. The woman's eyes scanned her. Her lips turned up at the edges as she grinned. She stepped aside and held out her hand in greeting. Hi, I'm Catherine. You must be Nicole. Please come in and take a seat. Nicole took the outstretched hand and returned the firm grip. Catherine indicated a chair by the side of one desk. Nicole gave the room a cursory glance. She noticed two desks and a two-seater settee as she walked to the chairs. A printer adorned a small cabinet in the corner. On the wall behind one desk were 3 framed photographs. On another, official-looking certificates proudly hung. Nicole took a couple of cleansing breaths and her nose noted the lingering odour of painted walls. Then fresh ground coffee wafted through the open window soon replaced it. The vertical blinds adorned the windows, allowing rays of sunlight to filter through, casting a moving pattern on the wooden floor as they swayed gently in the breeze. Dust mites danced and moved in accompaniment. She glimpsed the outside seating area as she sat down in the designated chair. She pulled her shoulders back and sat upright as her hands fidgeted in her lap. She willed them to be still. Nicole watched as Catherine sat at the desk and, putting on her glasses, glanced at the paperwork in her hands before peering into Nicole's eyes. It appeared as though she was trying to delve into her soul. You're here for the cleaning job we have advertised in the window. Nicole nodded, and even though she felt uncertain, she said with the confidence, Yes, I am. Catherine reread the resume, then peered over the top of her glasses. She asked, I haven't any references from your previous place of work. Is there any reason for that? Nicole squirmed in the chair and closed her eyes. She was prepared for this question, but the timing took her by surprise. An internal battle fought for dominance. Should she be completely candid, tell a part truth, or lie? Okay.
I muted myself by accident. That's great. Thank you. That was a very interesting opening. I mean, I'm going to ask this question. I know it's not question time, but why did you decide to write from the point of view of a homeless person?
Because Bristol at the moment has got so many van people. Mm-hmm. They everywhere you go where there's a bit of spare land, there's vans, and people living in the vans. And we're close to where I just moved from, because I just moved house. The vans were coming up and parking in our turning circle every night. And so I thought, yeah, I want to be and get to become part of that community and see and try and think what it's going to be like to lose everything. And that's why I thought about that scenario.
Your description of what it feels like was very compelling. I was really moved by it. So
thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay. Well, since I, broke the rules, but we're going to go next to Valden Bush, who's going to read next. And don't forget to unmute yourself, Val.
Yes, I have a habit of trying to do things muted, and everybody's going, trying to stop me. Good evening, and thank you for inviting me. It's very kind of you. I'm going to read today from a book I have. It's written. It's with the copy editor at the moment. I'm expecting it to come out later this year. It's got a working title of Risky Attraction, Love in Africa. It's got a variety of different working titles, but it's a story. My second book was a story based on a department in the ministry in the UK, in London, called Department 6. And it worked on off the books jobs for the government, rescue members of the government rescuing women in various places. This is the second book in that series, and this one involves the US ambassador to Britain, who goes on holiday to see the gorillas in Africa and gets kidnapped. And they want to send Department 6, who have staff that have worked in Africa and are familiar with where the ambassador has been kidnapped. The American embassy in London decides that it wants to take part in it, although they know nothing about the country in particular. They've got nobody there. Their embassy has been thrown out. And so they pluck a woman from a conference who's come from Texas, where she does off the books operations. And they've plucked her out of a conference in London and put her in the team to go to Africa. And the story is based on this American army lieutenant and a British leader of the project to rescue the ambassador. I've summarized a lot, but it's an adventure story, really. And I'm just going to read you a bit I'm sorry I can't do an American accent. I have tried it. I sound as if I've come from India. So the two people I'm talking about here is Alex, who is English, and Mitch, who's American. Mitch's door was thrown open, and there stood Alex with her hands on her hips and fire in her eyes. I've had word from Neela about an operation in the northern grasslands where shots were fired and 2 villagers were injured. When I came to find you, you were missing. Tell me you weren't there. Tell me you didn't go behind my back after what we shared and then blow this op sky high because you had to do it all yourself. I can't say that. I was there. Mitch stood tall and crossed her arms. Alex flushed and clenched and unclenched her hands. There was a moment's silence, and Mitch wondered if Alex might actually take a swing at her. Alex did raise her hands, and her blonde mane of curly hair made her look like a roaring lion. You want to be promoted. You want to make captain, get somewhere with your career. You want to succeed. I tell you how you can achieve that. Do not take risks. Think before you act. And you ignore it. Ignore me. Mitch took a step backward. She was going to have to fight her way out of this. I had credible information from an asset. I didn't take any risks, and we had to move fast. Credible? If it was credible, she'd have been with you. Instead, I could have told you we had the same information, but shortly after, and we also knew the ambassador had been taken there initially and had been moved. Alex said, The same informant called later to tell us a rumour about a failed op at that village and someone being injured. I would have told you this over breakfast if you'd been here, instead of rushing off like you didn't have a boss, like there wasn't a chain of command, like you had the authority to do it on your own. She hadn't lost any of her anger and was still moving toward Mitch, who took another pace backward. How many men are injured? We had one killed. Mitch felt Alex's words like small daggers piercing her chest. How many injuries? Speak up, I can't hear you, Alex said, as she took a third step forward. One man was killed. He died in the plane on the way back. Mitch shouted at Alex, finally losing her temper at Alex's holier-than-thou attitude. And it was down to you. You okayed the mission when it was futile because you knew better. Alex was right in her face. Do you understand yet? This death was your fault. You didn't need to go on this mission. If you'd been a leader, you'd have understood there was other information. You'd have understood that going in with all the information is necessary, and you'd have had the team to do it properly. My fault, Mitch said. I agreed the mission with Green. Green isn't the leader. You are. You should have had all the facts, and you should have discussed it with me, the team leader. But no, you went off half-cocked. Because of that, a man is dead, and his family will be grieving, Alex said. Not to mention, you've now alerted the kidnappers that we're out searching for the ambassador, and you may have cut our time to save her in half, if she isn't already dead, because they don't want to get caught with her in their village. You've potentially made it 10 times harder to find her dead or alive. Alex finally seemed to run out of breath, and she closed her eyes. I'm sorry. Mitch hung her head. She'd wanted a bit of glory for Uncle Sam and a bit of glory for herself. If it had worked, she'd have been a hero. As it was, she had foobarred the mission completely. Alex opened her eyes, the dark circles under them clearer as the sun came through the window. Don't say sorry to me. You need to say sorry to the family. I want you to find out where the family are, go and see them, and make sure they understand what a hero their son, husband, brother was. Make it clear he did an excellent job. Get any particulars you need in order to make sure we can take care of the family if he's still got military employ. But no, deep down, he'd still be alive if you just followed commands. Alex turned and walked towards the door. Then she stopped and turned. I can't speak anymore. You have let yourself down. You've let your uniform and country down, and more importantly, you've let me down. I'm not sure I'll ever trust you again. With that, she opened the door and was gone. Mitch stood unmoving for a long while, rooted to the spot by Alex's disappointment. She stared at the door and tried to think of something, anything, rather than the look on Alex's face. Crying was a waste of time, but fuck, she wanted to. And she was irritated with herself for wanting to. Life had become super difficult since she'd met Alex Graham. There was no disputing the fact. She pushed all Mitch's buttons, trying to help her get to where she wanted to go. At the same time, she was trying to change her. Shouldn't a woman accept her for who she was? Trying to change someone was a losing proposition, never worth the effort. But Alex was trying to change her. And maybe, just maybe, it would be for the better. The end.
That was great. Thank you. We've got a variety of stuff here today. That's good.
You're welcome.
Okay. Maggie?
I'm unmuted now, I think. Can you hear me, everybody? Oh, great.
We can hear you.
I've got exactly the same problem as Valden because half my dialogue is by a young Californian, and I sound not even Indian. I sound very strange, sort of deep Somerset if I try and talk Californian, but I'll give it a little shot. This is a piece of work I'm writing at the moment. I've had a short but sort of interesting career since about 2020, writing a series of, well, two series of novels, mainly age gap romances, with a bit of a twist because I like to put them into context of real life. So there's one, the one it's set in Britain is set in a development agency concentrating on women's international development in London. And it goes from book to book, exploring the relationships between different women in that agency. The other series is set in Media Land in Los Angeles, where many, many years ago, I lived as an exchange student. And it's about life in California. And this, which I think might be the final book of this long series, is a little light rom-com, really, which hopefully brings the two sets of characters together so they all meet up in the end. And it's set mainly in Oxford. And the main character is a woman called Fenella, who is the editor of a very highfalutin and posh, periodical, a magazine that not many people read. And she's very keen on correct grammar. She's a little bit of a snob. And she's a slightly unhappy person who's been through 3 marriages and has 2 teenage sons. She's in her mid-40s. And this little excerpt starts where she knows she needs to revamp the magazine and update it, and her PA got in touch with a design company and they've arranged to come and meet her for lunch. So this is the story of that lunch. And let me just put my watch there so I can keep to time. By the time Fenella left the office, she was quite decided. Farlane Designs was a non-starter. Far too modern, far too trendy. It would be a wasted hour of her life to meet them. But now it was too late to cancel, and she supposed she could endure their company for a quick lunch. Carlucci's was a favourite eating place of hers and was in walking distance of the office, so close in fact that she arrived 10 minutes early and took a booth seat against the inner wall. A drink? No, I'm waiting for 2 guests, so just some sparkling water, please. The waitress left her some menus and glided away. Fenella took a moment to settle herself and rehearse the polite brush-off. She would listen to their pitch, appear interested, smile, mention tight budgets, and then skip dessert and send the women on their way, nicely prepared to accept the answer, no. For 10 minutes she sipped her sparkling water with half an eye on the restaurant door. Ah, there they were. But then she frowned as the designers arrived. 2 confident, well-dressed women bearing portfolios came through the door, prompt to the minute. But they were followed by a third, much younger specimen of womanhood. This person's nymph-like body was both hidden and exposed in the most appalling get-up Fenella had ever seen. Designer-inspired slashes and rips, or maybe just the result of a quarrel with a barbed wire fence, now revealed far too much thigh through her tight black jeans, and a magenta striped topknot tumbled over her ears, above a face covered in Gothic makeup. She looked like an escaped animal from a travelling circus. Beneath the makeup and costume, her skin was a golden apricot, and she had a look of a distrustful lynx. Despite Fenella refusing to pay them any attention, she couldn't fail to see that those long eyelashes framed eyes as blue as a spring sky. Fenella stood up to shake hands with the adults in the room and tried to concentrate on what they were saying. Fenella Hamilton? Well, I'm Madeline Farlane, and this is Carla Brown, our head of graphic design. Thanks so much for meeting us. Now, I know it's not professional, but I do hope you won't mind. We have Carla's cousin, Susanna, here. We've just had to collect her from the airport. I know it's an imposition, but she won't bother you. She could even sit at another table if you prefer. Fenella had never met anybody like this feral creature in her life. "How do you do?" she managed to say to the walking ragbag. A US West Coast accent emerged from a wide, generous mouth. "Hey, just fine. I love your accent. It's straight out of Downton Abbey. Real cool." Fenella tried to smile and not shudder. Madeline said, unnecessarily, "Susanna's from the States." "Really? I wouldn't have known." Fenella knew as she spoke this was rude. Carla now had the grace to blush and explain, "Susanna's over here to start a degree and is staying with me for a few weeks before term begins." At art college, I presume? She's in graphic design as well? "Oh, heck no." Susanna seemed happy to speak for herself. "I'm not into that. I'm a nerd from Nerdsville. I'm into classics, Latin, Greek. I'm headed off to a little college at Oxford University. It's called St. Hugh's." Astounded, Fenella gestured for them to join her in the red leather booth. Madeline and Carla placed themselves opposite so they could share their ideas face to face, while Susanna plonked herself down next to Fenella, effectively pinning her against the wall. "Don't mind me," she said cheerfully. "I'm so jet-lagged. I'll probably pass out straight away. I've just watched 4 films back to back on a 12-hour flight." "From where, exactly?" Fenella wondered why she even cared to know. "Well, from Portland. The Oregon one, not the main one. It's so long, it's so far away." The waitress returned to take their orders. Madeline and Carla asked to share a thin crusted pizza and green salad. Fenella was about to ask for a salad as well, but she suddenly felt very hungry. For what, she wasn't quite sure. She turned to Susanna. "Would you like to share a pizza with me?" "Oh, no, better not. I'm so starving you wouldn't get any of it. The airline food was gross. I'll take pasta puttanesca, if they have it." "You mean spaghetti?" It was out before Fenella could stop herself. Susanna grinned and batted her luxuriant eyelashes. If she hadn't inspected them so closely, Fenella would have thought they were false. "Oh, yes, and I'll have extra olives if they have them." The lunch proceeded on 2 levels. Madeline and Carla talked through their ideas and options, while Fenella's mouth opened and shut appropriately as she responded between mouthfuls of spaghetti. For some reason, she'd chosen the same dish as Susanna, but they could have been talking about anything for all she made of it. Something very weird was happening both to her mind and her body, way beyond logic and words. The dreadful young woman beside her, with clothes held together by safety pins and bits of string, was emitting some sort of gamma ray, attracting her with pheromones, making her palms sweat and a sensation grow between her legs, which suddenly intensified from a slight tickle into a blazing fire. What the hell was going on? The lunch didn't end the way she intended either. Instead of rising from the table after 40 minutes, Fenella found herself ordering desserts and coffee. The pair opposite her consumed vast amounts of tiramisu as they became progressively more excited about the brilliance of their own ideas. The young thing next to her, on the other hand, seemed to be sinking into sleep, clearly terminally jet-lagged. Her chirpy chatter sank into silence, thank God. But then she had the temerity to invade what little space Fenella had left and slump sideways into her. Fenella tried to nudge her away, only to find her absolutely fast asleep, her head leaning on her shoulder. But at least the horrible accent had turned off. She let the girl's multicolored head rest on her shoulder and managed to lift her coffee cup with her left hand. Carla finally noticed, "Oh, I am so sorry. We'd better get Susanna home and put her to bed. But thank you for such a productive meeting. I'll draw up a properly worked response and drop it off at the end of the week. Is that okay?" Well, budgets are very tight." Fenella managed to get those words out. Now Madeline smiled. "Oh, don't worry. We're very competitive. This commission will mean a huge thing for us, and we want to make sure you're completely satisfied." Fenella's mouth went dry. When was she ever satisfied? She don't think she'd ever been completely satisfied. But she was unable to concentrate with this gothic horror nymphette now pressed against her ribs. But then Carla and Madeline came round the table and hauled Susanna awake, shaking her as they gathered up their papers. The girl's face turned pink beneath her makeup as she woke up. "Oh, sorry, what a bummer. How did that happen? Have I dribbled all over your jacket?" Fenella had no words. She simply stared into those eyes, as clear blue as a Siamese cat's behind all the mascara. But then she rallied. "No, it's fine. No dribbling. You just need to get some sleep, young lady." "Sure, but can I come and see you again? I'm sorry I messed up today. I really want to get to know you. I'd love to get to know you better." "No, you can't come to see me." "Why do you want to know me better?" Fenella didn't know at all where this was leading. "Well, Carla looked you up on Google and says you're a classics buff. You know all about Latin and you smell wonderful as well. I think you should know that. What is it?" "Well, what impertinence." "J'adore." "Ah, I'm sure I sure do adore it." "Oh, so can I come and see you? I would love to learn everything about you." This exchange was becoming increasingly bizarre. "No, sorry, I'm far too busy." "Okay then, well, I'll get Carla to give me your email address. I'm sure you'll find the time when you can fit me in." "Come on," said Carla firmly. "Mrs. Hamilton said no. We've got to go." Everyone stood up. Fenella beckoned the waitress over to get the bill and felt for her purse. The design duo pushed Susanna towards the door, thanking Fenella again for the lunch, apologizing once more as they left. A huge feeling of release and relief swept through her, but also a sharp pang of regret. She hesitated and then pulled a business card out of her purse, one with a private number on the back. And as the others headed out, she called, "Here, Carla, take this. Give it to your cousin. We might arrange something." Then they were gone. Fenella stood by the till and tried to recenter herself. How had this happened? It must be the perimenopause, perhaps the foretaste of a few dreadful years to come. She remembered having a compulsion to eat nothing but tinned salmon when she was pregnant. Maybe this strange hunger was a similar hormonal imbalance. She really should start dating again, find a new man. But for some unknown reason, she knew a man was the last thing she wanted, the last thing she needed right now. End of chapter.
Thank you very much. I couldn't help but laugh. I hope I wasn't distracting because one of the things that Maggie does is sends me some of her work in progress to cheer me up because she knows how very miserable I've been made by politics here in the United States. And I can remember reading this scene and laughing and at the depiction of this totally affecting but aggressive young American. It's just so perfectly portrayed. So, and it's a wonderful scene, and I love your ironic approach to trying to depict these two people.
Yeah, well, the plot thickens, as you can imagine. The book's going to be called Falling for Fenella, because Susie does get a look in later on in the book, and we hear it from her perspective as they tumble into the most mismatched relationship on the planet. And it's a bit of fun. It's not that heavy, but it's I'm enjoying writing it at the moment, which is something. We all need cheering up, don't we?
Indeed, we do. So I'm going to open the floor to questions now. And you can either put your questions in the chat and I'll bring it to the attention of whoever you're asking the question of. You can also raise your hand if you have your...
Katerina's raising her hand.
Okay. Let's see. Katerina.
You need to unmute yourself.
I thought I just did. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you
Yes.
have now. Yeah.
You can. Okay. I've got for Terry first, because she read first. You chose a very clever place to stop your reading. I, for one, want to find out now whatever happens next. And my question for you is, can the books from this series be read as standalones, or do you have to read the whole series to get your way around?
They can be read as standalones, but to get the background, I do recommend you read The Perfect Blend first. The others be read anytime, because you know the characters from The Perfect Blend, and then the new the following books are the new characters, but in that coffee house situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
You started with Terry. Did you have other questions, Katerina?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
For Valden, I have a question. Did you try and match Mitch's diction, like word choice and sentence structure, to American English? I couldn't tell when you read it, your very pleasant British tone.
Yes, I have tried to match the words, and I've had two different Americans have read it and taken out my posh English.
Because the vocabulary is sometimes very different. I know, because I learned English in a German school, and we were taught British English. And I felt like I had to learn English all over again when I try to read American books or talk to Americans. So
yeah,
that's why I was asking.
I've done my best. I think if reading through the whole book, if you are American, I think you will gather the difference over the book. The British girl, Alex, is very British, and the American, and quite calm. And Mitch, the American girl, is like a bull in a china shop. Is that an English phrase or a? I don't know. Anyway, she's it's like a bull in a china shop. She hits everything head on. But they are very different, and the Americanisms come out. I think I tried to make them come out, and they sounded even more English. So I had to Americans to help me out. I thought I did quite well with my American, but it still sounded posh British.
Okay.
But yes, so
thank you.
I had to have some help, and my next book has got another American in it, and I'm going to have some more help.
Okay, thank you.
It's very different. It's very difficult writing stories set on both sides of the Atlantic, because particularly I think for Americans trying to write British people, it's really writing in your second language. And I mean, I wrote a book about a couple of Americans taking a horse all the way across America. And I had an American proofreader who said at the end, gee, she doesn't like us very much, does she? Because it was mainly about Indians being massacred. Every state that these poor people crossed, they found another Indian massacre. But I tried very hard to be American. But getting the tone right is the hardest thing. It really is. And I appreciate it. I mean, the spelling is one thing. I mean, in the past, we've had people give us a poor review because they said it wasn't proofread properly and it was there were lots of spelling mistakes, which is deeply annoying. Because if you're writing a British book and you put a U into colour and you put double L's into travelling and you don't use Z's but you use S's. This is one of Fenella's bugbears. She's a grammarian. So the whole book is a sort of, as a subtext all the way through about how to spell things. But it is a tricky, all of us, I think, who write in both genres, find it. It's not as straightforward as you think. So, you know, anybody who is like, I mean, that's why I cherish my American pals to try and put me on the right lines. And some of the expressions I use go back to when I lived in there, you know, back in the early 70s. And people say, well, nobody says that in America. Well, it's just that it's a different generation now. And the people I knew when I was in California had emigrated from Minnesota. So I discovered lots of the comments were Minnesotan catchphrases and things. A bit like Rose in the Golden Girls, you know, coming out with little things all the time. But a language changes all the time. It changes every decade, doesn't it?
But language is always different anyway. Like the way I speak and the way I write is totally different to someone, say, up in Newcastle, you know.
Absolutely.
And you know, people say, I got to not do it in Bristolian, and I speak in Bristolian and I sound like a pirate half the time, you know.
Well, Jill and I know that because I come from Stroud, and people who live in Stroud can't say Stroud. We say Stroud because we come from Stroud, and everyone tells us off and says we've got Gloucestershire accents, which is ridiculous because it's where we come from. But I'm the same, you know. I feel like I feel happy with your accent because it's close to the one I was brought up with.
Yeah.
I have a few questions in the chat. I see, Terry, that you answered Jill's question directly about it being a romance, but maybe you tell the rest of us too.
Yeah, all my books will end up in a happy ever after because I hate it if I get to the end of the book and it's not a happy ever after if I'm reading one, and I think, oh. So I will always write my romances, and there will be a happy ever after. Whether it's a permanent happy ever after, who knows? So, because the question Evie asked us, or Jill asked us, is it my book's romance, or and do they have a happy ever after? Yeah.
And here's a question for Valden. Will there be more books in this series?
As usual,
You've done it again.
Yes, I seem to be writing one of the Department 6 stories and then one of something else. So the one I gave the reading from will be out later this year. And I'm just starting writing another one that's not from Department 6. And it's about hurricanes in the Caribbean. So, and then the next one will be a Department 6 one, which will be rescuing some hapless woman somewhere.
So you like adventure stories?
Oh yes, 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 yes. I have lots of people have said to me, "Can't you just write a straight romance?" And the answer is no. I've tried. I've tried to write a romance, but it doesn't come out very well. And my sex scenes, if I've just got romance and no adventure around it, my sex scenes sound like something. Do you have a Haynes manual in America? Um,
How to mend your car.
how you meant?
Oh, yes, we have an equivalent. Yes.
That's what my sex scenes tend to come out like if I'm not careful. So I stick to
That's
my
great.
with a little bit of sex and a little bit of romance.
I can't write romance either, so I sympathize.
Valden's story is always very exciting, and whether she's ventured into science fiction as well, but they I think they're great. They're very pacey, and I always like reading them. Well, I like reading everyone's.
I was just going to say, as Eleanor saying about she can't write romances, but she's written how many is it? 11?
11, yeah, in that series about Maine.
Yeah, but and to me that's romance. There's a lot of romance in there. So yes, you can.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, but I can't do it by formula. Do you know what I mean? There's a kind of set of rules about romance. I start out right away breaking them all because that's who I am, you know. But
I think
so you think that makes it more interesting?
Yes. Yeah.
and there's a question for you, Maggie, too, from Jill. It's, I love that scene. Do you find it easy to write comedy?
Yes, I like writing comedy. I like making people laugh. And I tend to start with main characters who are pretty unlikable. They're either, I had one who was like a Martha Stewart type character who was, gave advice on everything in the world. And she came a big cropper because she had never actually experienced love and she was trying to hide the fact. And so some of my books are very light-hearted. Some are really gut-wrenching. I had my first big book set in California called Heat Wave, upset some people because the heroine, the main character, talks about her childhood where her father, who had accosted her and fathered, she was pregnant by her own father. And just as he's being hauled off to prison, he turns and shoots her and her unborn child, which was a bit of a not very comedic scene. And it upset a few of the readers. So you've got to be careful. I don't believe, though, in putting warning signs unless there's something really gross actually described on the page. I don't know what other people think about that. But all this idea of warning somebody that somebody might get hurt. I mean, Dickens didn't write in Oliver Twist. This has scenes of violence and brutality and murder. So you may, take care when you read it. I don't know.
I'm not going to speak to that because I've got myself in plenty of trouble talking about trigger warnings on Facebook.
Yeah, trigger warning.
So, but maybe someone else would weigh in on the value of trigger warnings.
I guess it gives people a choice whether to read something or not, doesn't it?
But I think there's two ways of looking at it. It gives somebody a choice, but quite often I feel that if we're not careful as writers, we end up putting 10 trigger warnings at the beginning of a book. And then you think, well, why am I doing this? Maybe I should put, if you have any of the following triggers, please don't read this. So looking at it from the other side, if I don't like something about a book, I stop reading it. So I struggle with people talking about their trigger warnings. It's like if there's a TV program on television you don't like, don't watch it. Is it me?
No, I don't think it is you. Trigger warnings annoy me because I think, well, I know that's going to happen somewhere. And do I, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I don't, to me, it sort of halts the whole thing. It's almost a type of censorship, isn't it?
Or is it more like a spoiler?
Yeah.
A little of both, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you describe the book well enough, I don't know that you need to actually list all the things that might come up. For example, one of my recent books was about a school shooting. And so the script says this is about a school shooting. And some critic, a reviewer said, oh, it should have a trigger warning for gun violence. And I'm like, it's about a school shooting. How much more can we say? But I think it can, like everything, can get to the point of absurdity.
And also it could be that you have got a very long list of trigger warnings in your preface, and then someone gets triggered by something else entirely. So who knows what triggers people? I should know what triggers me and either head right in because I want to face it or avoid it. That's my responsibility. If I'm triggered by something, that's my opinion as a reader.
Well, in this discussion on Facebook regarding the trigger warnings that I referenced, somebody said, well, there should be trigger warnings about the death of a pet. And I thought to myself, okay, is there a person alive who hasn't experienced that? It seems like we need a trigger warning for everything that you might encounter in
real life. Well, when you think that in England, in Great Britain, 3 women a week are murdered by somebody close to them, a domestic violence, they're murdered. We live in a world that finding any space where there's not violence is a you have to go on quite a quest. But I try and give a clear warning if the book isn't light-hearted. I mean, nearly all my books so far have had happy endings. But I know some of my romance readers decided that it was too much for them when I ventured off into a sort of fantastic historical slave culture at the end of a sort of Roman Empire story. And what I'm going to do on advice, which I think is very sensible advice, is to take those books out of my catalogue and re-edit them, put them together as one big book and reissue them under another name so people don't get mistaken by what they read. I think that's a reasonable response.
That's interesting.
That book was all about slavery and flogging and murder and the life of a despotic emperor. And so it wasn't what a lot of people were used to with my genre, which is cheerful.
That's an interesting question about different pseudonyms for different genres. That was a big question for me when I went away from doing historical fiction and went over to contemporary fiction. Well, I just kept the same name because it was easier. But that is a strategy that some people have used and effectively, I think. I know that Maggie McIntyre is not your real name. I know that Valden that's not her real name. But what about Terry? Is that your real name, Terry?
Teresa. I was christened Teresa, and because my mum liked the name Terry, and I've been called Terry all my life. But I thought if I'm publishing something in as a sapphic writer, then if I publish under Terry, they might not think it's me, if you see what I mean. Teresa is more sort of, yeah, that's a woman writing sapphic literature rather than Terry. Could that be a man writing it? I don't know. So that's why I publish under Teresa, even though I always think that if anyone calls me Teresa, I'm being told off by someone.
Your granny talking to you. Yeah.
And
Yes,
if my middle name is then mentioned as well, I'm definitely being told off.
I came up with Valden Bush because I'm not worried particularly about anybody knowing what my name is. But when I started getting involved in sapphic fiction, I play in brass bands, and I spend a lot of time with children, and I didn't want my Facebook page covered in stuff about lesbians and small children reading the stuff that appears unwanted on my Facebook page. So I took some advice and decided to come up with another name. It doesn't particularly bother me, and sometimes you wish you'd got your own name on it, on your books and things, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, I'm similar. I started, but sometimes you come a cropper and I've got 2 Facebook pages and it's a nightmare following, who's answering, and I've got 2 Gmail accounts. But the gay fiction, sapphic fiction stuff, I accidentally posted on my ordinary Facebook at one point. So a lot of people were quite astonished and had to swallow that. But I would always respect anybody who wanted to remain anonymous, because we all have a different life story, we have different pressures, and we have a different background. And those of us who are older, I mean, I'm now in my 70s, have had a different upbringing from people who are in their 30s and 40s now. So I would never, ever be judgmental about what anyone chose to do, about whether to remain totally anonymous or to have different pen names for different genres. And particularly when you write sapphic fiction. And under the current, weird stuff that's suddenly erupting, it's becoming, retrograde very quickly. So.
Has anybody been affected by this Amazon boycott? Have you found your sales to be?
Yeah. Yes, I so far in March I've earned £21.50. It's enough to buy one meal. And normally I'd take about 300 or 400 a month. I was, until Christmas. And I don't. But I don't write full time, and I don't advertise very much. So, I mean, I know my low sales, I've only got myself to blame. But this is ridiculous. The sales have plummeted. I don't know what the rest of you have found.
Yeah, my sales have virtually disappeared, but I know that I'm really late on getting this book out because of different things which happened, family things and whatever. I was due to get it out in September, and now it's March, and so life got in the way, and I know that I haven't produced anything new, and people are waiting for
people
new
forget
ones.
very quickly who you are if you don't keep publishing.
So,
well, we're past our time, so maybe we should wind up our discussion. I'd like to thank all of you for coming today and reading to us. And as I said, I will post the recording. I'll send you a link to it. So if you want to share it, please feel free to do so. And thanks again. We really needed this, I think. I see that Judy Graziano wrote in the chat how happy she is to hear all of you reading in your your accents, Just as you talk about writing American English, of course, we talk about you. But again, thank you. And thank you everyone who came today. And
Thank you for hosting it.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and thank you all, people who've commented. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to stop the recording right now.